Well, I'm back. I took a while to make this one because Season 4 is kind of a hard season to watch. I would say this season is half bad and half good, which is not terrible for a show, but compared to the last 3 seasons, which were pretty much perfect, it's a pretty big downgrade. When Steven Hillenburg left the show after the SpongeBob movie, it can be felt pretty strongly in Season 4 and the rest of the seasons until, I think, Season 9. Unfortunately, this is a season where flanderization starts to happen. There are some episodes that feel like it belong in the classic era, but there's a lot of stuff for characters and stuff like that feel like they're getting flanderized, which is a shame because this show is really good. But let's see what the ranking tells us. I'm going to be ranking them a little shorter than I usually do. I'm doing them like the last TV ranking I did on the DuckTales because I think it's better just to do short episodes one by one because I'll be here all day complaining about some of the bad episodes. And this will be a good guide for you who haven't seen Season 4 or want to go which ones are good to go back to and which ones are worth avoiding, because there's some great episodes of Season 4, however, there's a lot of duds there too, so this will give you a nice landmine test for the episodes. Alright, let's go. Number 38, Wishing You Well. SpongeBob and Patrick and then Squidward are just stuck in a well that Mr. Krabs built. That's it. It's boring, it's not funny, and Mr. Krabs is a giant asshole. Number 37, Wig Strike. Is this wig funny? Do you find this wig funny? No, then this episode sucks. Everyone's an asshole, and SpongeBob's wig is not funny or entertaining to watch. It sucks. Number 36, All That Glitters. You want to see a whole 11-minute episode where SpongeBob cries the entire time because he broke his one spatula, even though he showcased in the past he had multiple different spatulas, but whatever. Number 35, Chimp Hoy. This episode's just bad in so many levels, it's hard to even explain. It's weird, it breaks continuity a bit. One of the first episodes have flanderized Sandy in a way that she's not her original self, and it has these weird chimp characters that feel so out of place in SpongeBob. Number 34, Hocus Pocus. SpongeBob cries for 11 minutes because he thinks he's turned Squidward into an ice cream cone. It rips up Wizard of Oz for one entire scene, and it would be funny if, the joke wasn't done in 1939. This episode is pretty bad, but it did spawn a pretty iconic meme. Number 33, New Leaf. This episode takes a pretty interesting concept of Plankton, giving up, trying to steal his Krusty Krab secret formula and make his own shop, but executes it in the worst way possible, where it's boring, mean-spirited, and just not funny. Number 32, Once Bitten. This episode takes the concept of something that could have been funny or creative, but then does it in the laziest and uninteresting way possible. A zombie apocalypse, and it's not very interesting. The way it's set up, the way the characters act, and the conclusion are all just weak and really just not funny at all. Number 31, The Thing. This episode is just flat out bad. It's just what you call a prototypical Squidward torture porn. He's turned into a thing, and that's about it. Nothing else to say here. Number 30, Bummer Vacation. This episode is so boring that I fell asleep during it. Just kidding, I didn't fall asleep because it's only 11 minutes, but still, it's that boring. Number 29, Squidtastic Voyage. This episode concept worked way better in Jimmy Neutron and not SpongeBob. It's just really weird, but not weird in a funny way, just a weird in a lame way. Number 28, The Lost Mattress. This episode concept is just flat out bad, and they can't really do much of it, especially with these writers during this time period, so you get a really lame episode that's really kind of forgettable and also doesn't have a lot of jokes going on here. Number 27, Crusty Island. This is one of the few Sandy episodes in this season, and it's pretty bad. Also, this episode we consider to be the best episode of SpongeBob at that time, somehow. They said, people voted for this episode, and a lot of people hated it because of that. It is a pretty episode. Interesting concept, but terrible execution. Number 26, Good Neighbors. I don't think I need to talk about this episode that much. It's considered the first bad episode of SpongeBob, or the first episode that increased the downfall of SpongeBob, because it is just a really bad episode. It's also, I would consider it to be the first ever, quote-unquote, Squidward torture porn episode, or whatever you want to call it. Number 25, The Gift of Gum. It's a gross-out episode that's really weird and not really funny. Number 24, Ghost Host. While there is some cool creative imagery in this episode, it's very short-lived, and the rest of the episode is incredibly boring. Number 23, Born to be Wild. SpongeBob mixes up the wild ones for the mild ones. If you don't think that joke's funny, then you're not going to find this episode funny. Number 22, Funny Pants. It's not really interesting or memorable, it's kind of annoying. Number 21, Squidward. If it wasn't for this one joke here, where the fish are swimming in the air like this episode would have been ranked a lot lower, because the rest of the episode just, hates on Squidward for basically no reason. But hey, what do you expect from a mid-season episode? Number 20, Driven to Tears. This episode is almost higher up. The execution as it gets near the end is pretty bad, but the concept is pretty funny of Patrick getting his license and SpongeBob being jealous of him. Number 19, SquidBob Tentacle Pants. This episode is incredibly weird and kind of uncanny, but it doesn't do a bad job at its execution, if that makes any sense. Number 18, Enemy Inlaw. It's just Plankton dating Mr. Krabs' mom. That's the whole episode. Number 17, Rule of Dumb. This episode could have been bad, but it takes the idea of being a king going to Patrick's head, and that's why he goes crazy, rather than just him being an asshole in general. And it's kind of good commentary on kings and dictatorships, basically. Number 16, Patrick's Smartpants. This episode could have been bad, but I think they did a good job in execution. The way it begins and ends, I actually think are pretty clever, and I really like the way the episode goes through its story arc. Number 15, the Pink Puler, is that how you say it? I actually like this episode. It's a good showcase of SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship. Alright, it's a pretty good episode. Number 14, Best Frenemies. Mr. Krabs and Plankton teaming up to stop another corporation is pretty good at concept. However, the ending kind of sucked. But other than that, it's a good episode. Number 12, Shel A Man. It's pretty alright. I actually swore this episode was in the classic era, so I was like, wait, this is actually a season 4? Well, golly. Number 13, That Snow Lady. This episode could have been bad, but execution-wise, it does a pretty good job, especially since everyone thinks Patrick as a girl is hot, and I don't know why that's funny as crap to me. Especially Larry the Lobster here. It's like, you should be dating your lady instead of talking to me. I don't know why that's funny to me, but it is. Number 11, Dungeons and Dragons. This episode is mostly known for its aesthetic and setting more than anything else. It's pretty fine, but nothing too funny. It's just a nice, interesting setting that they're in. Number 10, Krabs vs. Plankton. A really good concept for an episode, where Plankton tries to seduce Mr. Krabs. I feel like the ending is a little but overall, the concept is just gonna be funny in general. Number 9, Fear of a Krabby Patty. This episode is just bizarre, but it's kind of funny. It's a very weird mixture of a lot of different things, and yeah, overall, it's an alright episode. Number 8, Selling Out. Mr. Krabs sells the Krusty Krab to make it into a chain, and it turns out to be like a horror episode, which is really, it's unsettling, but in the funniest way possible, because it's so beat. I like this episode a lot. Number 7, Mrs. Puff, You're Fired. This is just a great concept. What if Mrs. Puff was replaced with a drill sergeant and SpongeBob actually learns how to drive, but only blindfolded? It's such a beat and funny episode and has some great jokes from it that I love this episode. It's good. Number 6, Best Day Ever. I didn't like this episode as a kid, but now as an adult I kind of like it. Somehow it reminds me of the earlier seasons. Nice episode, and of course the song is good, but the song came from the movie. Number 5, Skill Crane. Squidward becomes obsessed with a claw machine, and you know what? That's just funny in general. I like claw machines, so yeah, it's a pretty funny episode. Number 4, Whale of a Birthday. There's only one Pearl episode, and it actually happens to be one of the best episodes of the season. It's just hilarious. There's a lot of good setup, and has a great payoff. It's a classic SpongeBob episode. Number 3, Have You Seen This Snail? The intro is a little for me, but the rest of the episode is really good. And this almost was a 10 out of 10 episode, but unfortunately the intro fails. But this episode's iconic and did it better than the third SpongeBob movie by a landslide. Number 2, Crusty Towers. This episode is great. The Krusty Krab gets turned into a hotel, and Squidward initially gets tortured, but then he turns it around back on Mr. Krabs, which is what makes this episode a classic. It justifies the beginning because he gets revenge. I kind of like that episode. If you're going to have a character be punched for not doing anything wrong, at least have him get something back in return, and that's why Crusty Towers is a good episode. Well, there's a lot of other reasons too. It's a funny episode in general. Number 1, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 6, the motion picture. This episode is great. It actually feels like an episode that came out of the first season. That's how good it is. Not first, the first 3 seasons, if you know what I mean. Every character from SpongeBob is used in a great way. It sort of reminds me of Band Geeks in that way. It's just a funny concept where SpongeBob tries to make his own Mermaid Man and Barnacle movie when the heroes of the remake without the original Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. How could they do that? And yeah, that's the episode. I highly recommend watching this one if you're going to watch any episodes. And actually, a lot of these episodes are actually good. And that was SpongeBob Season 4. An overall, okay season. I would rate it a 7 out of 10 overall. However, I do recommend skipping over bad episodes unless you're like me and want to watch every single episode. Anyway, next time we'll be doing Season 5. That is, if I do it soon enough, because this episode took a lot longer for me to make than the last 3 seasons. But I'll see you then.